longtime meme of the Chinese is they're long thinkers. Is that a reality, or is that just something the West imposes upon them?
Um, that's that's interesting. Okay, here's something in relation to that. The Chinese trying to get manpower, and this is something I don't really know much about. Maybe you do. What are the inroads that the Chinese have been trying to make into Africa?
Okay, so generally what they're doing is, and they learned it from us pretty much. What they're doing is they're going into these African nations, and they're sitting there saying, okay, here's this huge infrastructure project that's completely beyond your means, and maybe it's like building the autobahn in Chad or something, or maybe it's huge hydroelectric dams or whatever it is. It's just they're huge projects. They're the kind of stuff the U.S. used to do in like the 30s and 40s. And they come rolling in and say, hey, yeah, we can do this project for you. And here's the loan we're going to give you. And here's the side loan we're going to give El Presidente of the country that makes it really worth his while to do this because now he's fabulously rich. And what ends up happening is very shortly into the process, and part of it is, of course, is a lot of the contractors are Chinese.
Okay.
So they're getting a loan. A lot of Chinese contractors come in. They do use the local labor as well, but so essentially the money flows in, things are made, money flows back out, back to China, and then when it's all done, a few years into it, the country's going, oh, we're having a little bit of trouble with our payment. Oh, that's okay. Just by happenstance, we couldn't help noticing that your country had a lot of rare earths in it. No, we didn't even notice that before we started this Belt and Road project. We just happened to notice it afterwards. So, I mean, if you want to pay us in those minerals directly, we can cut you a slightly better deal. We'll give you a little bit better than market value for them, and you can go on making payments to us. So that's essentially what they're doing is they are using infrastructure projects to secure minerals and oil.
Okay. So does that, the Peter Zeihan thing is that China is going to become very geographically isolated as well, and because they also don't have the shipping capacity to do all the things that they would need to do to keep being China. The Indians do, and I don't know if China can cut a deal with India to have these ships that can go some real distance and whatnot.
Well, they'd be hard pressed because the Chinese and Indians have a fairly tense history, and India has usually been the one to kind of turn the other cheek in a lot of these instances. But China's getting belligerent, and the current Indian government is probably the closest thing you got to right wing as you're going to get there. Essentially, right now, their president is a Hindu nationalist.
Okay.
So, like Gandhi with an attitude.
I will be very forcefully peaceful at you.
I think to a certain. So, if I remember right, India's current birth rate is probably around 2.6. So they're above replacement rate, but they're not ludicrously above it. But I don't think they have the same age surge that everybody else is having. I think they steadied out several decades back. So when their population starts graying, it's not going to hit them nearly as hard as everybody else.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that Zeihan was saying as well. That, because he basically picked winners and losers on this. You had asked a question before when we very first started. What makes me think that he's not full of it?
Mm-hmm.
He's a neoliberal.
Yeah.
he wants the world that we live in right now. He doesn't actually want any of this to change.
Mm,
He would have this keep going and going. He likes all the bases everywhere,
that's
the
true.
American interference everywhere. And so this is not in his interest to say, you know. so that so there's something to that. I mean, obviously he can sell books, but
Hmm.
you know, that carries an interesting weight. You know, like he doesn't want this to happen, yet he's saying this is going to happen.
Yeah, I think that
I
gives it
don't. There's
credence.
a certain amount of glee that I get sometimes from like environmentalists, where they seem almost like happy that there'd be like, oh, there's going to be calamity and millions of humans will die.
Hmm. Well, and that's the problem with that they don't. Their lack of understanding of division of labor means that they think, oh, there will be a lot less people when I, grab my iPhone and head down to the coffee shop and pontificate with all the people around me. There will always be a table available for me for my free trade coffee and all. They don't understand. It's like we may not. Coffee may become a ridiculous luxury. You, a lot of the things you're taking for granted might not be available because we don't know how fast automation can keep up with the shift in population. And I mean, and that's the one big variable that we don't understand. Because I mean, essentially, what we're looking at in the demographics is there's a phrase you use in economics: if all things remain the same. That would
Okay.
be the one wild card: is can we automate our way out of the loss of division of labor? Can a lot of this stuff be turned over to other, to automation of some kind? I'm leaning towards no, because at a certain point, I mean, you do need. I mean, yeah, you can automate things, but someone still has to be there to create the automation. Someone still needs to be there to support the automation. And if you're getting more and more hung up with the problems of, we got to feed ourselves. Well, anything that's been coming in on boats that we eat isn't going to be happening anymore because everybody's going to be too busy fending for themselves. And just so in case, like if somebody's watching this, which I kind of hope happens, but if somebody's watching this and they're like, okay, what kind of world are you talking about here? Now, it's not. We're not talking like going like Mad Max or anything like that, where like we regress to uh, just
That's really too bad because you would look really cool in that Morton Joe outfit.
ooh.
Yeah.
But no, the gist of it is what'll happen is the division of labor will fall so much that world trade will be significantly diminished. It's going to be like, for instance, there's large chunks of the planet that are absolutely, for their agriculture, are absolutely dependent on agricultural fertilizer that comes from other countries. And in a situation with contraction of labor, a lot of these countries are going to say, we're not exporting that stuff anymore. We need it at home for our own stuff. So there's going to be countries, I think Australia was the one that got highlighted the most, that are absolutely dependent on all this stuff coming in from overseas that they do not have on their own. They're going to be facing an agricultural collapse. So the people they're feeding, they're no longer going to be feeding. Uh, China has crappy land to start with, so uh, they're going to be desperately scrounging for whatever food comes around the world. And the U.S. is probably, because right now, although a lot of people missed this, but we import food. We don't make all our own food anymore. And this has kind of been a function of, although our farmers have as great an output as they ever had, uh, we just need far more than we used to. So we're going to have to figure out how to put more farmland to use and get a lot more out of it. And we're going to be I mean, it's not like we're going to be facing mass starvation, but we're going to be sinking a lot more effort into feeding ourselves than we had in the past. And if you're sinking more effort into feeding yourself, there's other things you got to give up. And so that's the whole
Yeah.
thing is all around the world, everyone's going to have to be giving up on something they're used to doing. And probably will result in standard of living either stagnating, possibly retracting a bit, or at the very best, slowing down to an absolute crawl. Um, he seemed
So
to. Okay.
automation.
Yeah, automation. I mean that's really the great
Well,
white. Yeah.
no, I work in automation.
Yes.
That's part of my job is to automate things in software, and and actually, and it's a big job now. This is a thing that like people. It's very desired. I get uh, emails for job interviews several times a week. It happens all the time. um, Here's the problem, and Zeihan points this out, is that you know there's a lot of people at the height of their knowledge that if they can bail and retire, they will, and that leaves all of Gen X to do the rest of it. And we're smart enough, but there's less of us, and we don't want to work anyway. So, so yeah, that is also a problem. Is that the people, there's a much smaller employee base that is going to be around. And unfortunately, the millennials have missed several years of training in various points in their lives. They should be better. I'm not saying that they're bad
Yeah.
engineers or anything else, but they lost experience time through myriad things.
Yeah.
So, the housing market collapse, COVID then, just all kinds of crazy things. So they're a bigger generation than Gen X, but it's going to take them longer to get all of that experience and training
Okay.
to do the automation.
Okay. So
So
yep, so much for that. Well, thanks.
sorry.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I wasn't pinning my hope to that, but it's one of those things. Uh, it's like the real the part of the left, the super cracky environmentalists who like envision an Earth with a 500 million people on it or something, or even less. I can't remember what the number they were shooting around, and they have the one thing they forget is it's human beings, for all their faults, at some point survival kicks back in, and they just won't roll over and die. And so I was kind of hoping that urge to not roll over and die would include automation, but I wasn't counting on it. I mean, obviously, I look into my historical tool bag because it's the only tool bag I got. But obviously, when we're like, for instance, the United States, when it's first being, essentially when the waves of immigrants are coming in, there was a massive labor shortage, and one of the things that drove the innovation period in the late 1800s was the labor shortage. In fact, it was one of those things where the people coming in were actually creating, rather than filling jobs, were creating jobs faster. Essentially, the support needed for them created more need for jobs than they were actually filling, just because of the rate they were coming in. Which would be an interesting study in itself, trying to figure out if there's a way to calculate that rate and make it work. So it actually drove automation. But the problem is it purely the shortage of labor that caused that automation to occur, or was it the shortage of labor while people were still piling in that allowed that to happen? In our case, there aren't going to be people piling in. So that may be the missing component.